Understanding equity, diversity, and inclusion in noise pollution research through a community-led lens. The Noise Project is a collaboration between a group of community-based organizations, ICBOs, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and advisors. Our mutual goal is to improve equity, diversity, and inclusion in the sciences. We use community-led participatory action research, grounded theory, and critical race theory approaches in our community-led research project and use the arts to communicate our learnings and results. Noise pollution disproportionately affects minoritized communities and more diverse ethnic populations. When our project addresses noise pollution, we center the impacts of historic systemic injustice on diverse communities. We also explore the way in which collaborations between science institutions and communities take place and seek to make these collaborations more equitable. Our project is led by the communities affected by these issues. The ICBOs, independent community-based organizations, represent communities that have been historically excluded from the sciences across North America and have collectively used their strengths and expertise to explore deeper and more meaningfully community-led participatory action research representing their communities' perspectives. In 2018, the ICBOs and the Cornell Lab of Ornithology received a National Science Foundation Award. The purpose of this award is to create a community science project focused on noise pollution and to research and document the equitable co-creation of the project. Over the past few years, we have co-created equitable processes to build a community-led science project for use at the continental scale focused on noise pollution. Our community-led research includes methodologies that are inclusive of perspectives that have historically been silenced through traditional research and can be used to co-create more appropriate and relevant research metrics. The ICBOs began their work by creating a set of working agreements based on the GEMES principles for democratic organizing. We created our working agreements to help guide us in creating more equitable processes and in navigating through challenges. The ICBOs also created non-negotiables to guide research in their communities. This is equivalent to the institutional review board process from research institutions. The ICBOs questioned the IRB process and decided to establish their own review board centering their community's priorities, balancing power and who benefits in the scientific research. The non-negotiables focus on social justice and equity.
The community coding team collaborated on coding qualitative data from our community noise surveys. The data we coded responded to why minority communities are most affected by the negative health impacts of noise pollution. Our co-created community coding process ensures that we're integrating scientific and community perspectives and knowledge into our coding work through open dialogue, consensus, and co-creation of codes and their definitions. This was invaluable to our coding process because it helped us produce codes that held a fuller understanding of our data and kept our process and coding relevant. Coding in community helps us learn from each other's knowledge and expertise, honoring both scientific and community wisdom, and allows us to truly value diversity and practice equity and inclusion in real time. This process taught our team a lot about equitable collaboration while also giving us a richer and more in-depth understanding of our qualitative data.
Community-led research centers the needs and the desires of the community and the benefit for community. It's the community members who can best decide what will be studied, how it will be studied, and how those results will be shared and used. Community-led research recognizes and acknowledges that it's the community members themselves who have expertise, historical and cultural and ancestral knowledge, and lived experiences. Community members have established relationships with one another, relationships that are necessary for creating trust and transparency. And community-led research honors the connections that community members have to one another and to place, which is essential to understanding the realities of communities and ensuring that the research is relevant and beneficial.
Community-led research puts the community at first. It also allows for the realities and challenges within the community to be heard. And identifying these realities and challenges from the community members could pave way for creating an awareness and solution by the community and for the community.
5 leaders from underrepresented communities are co-principal investigators co-leading the research along with the institution's principal investigator. Our research learnings come from both our process and our qualitative data. Now let's hear from our community co-PIs themselves how they implemented the Noise Project in their communities.
Greetings, I'm Makeda Cheatham.
I'm Bernice Rodriguez, and we are co-PIs on the Noise Project, and we're from the World Beat Cultural Center in San Diego, California.
We begin our research project by lowering the sound decibels and providing earplugs at our concerts. We also realize noise pollution is a problem in urban communities, especially for communities of color, and they lacked access to noise refuge spaces or buffer zones against noise pollution. We then researched the benefits of plants and explored plant intelligence through plant music.
We are now using our garden as a wellness sanctuary for education and to research the impacts of noise for the San Diego urban community.
Metro Atlanta Urban Farm has served as a beacon of hope for underserved and marginalized communities across the Metro Atlanta area. Our focus for the Noise Project has been on farmers, young people, and college and university students. Our message to these communities is that noise can and will have an adverse effect upon the quality of life as well as your health. The other thing, number 2, as a young person, you must not become desensitized to the noise that's around you every day. And number 3, most of all, identify those quiet sanctuaries in your community and find them and spend some time.
Our project is using several approaches and tools to research noise pollution and its impacts from a community perspective. Guided by our non-negotiables, the ICBOs are co-creating an app that centers equity to measure noise levels in their communities and shares educational content about the effects of noise on health and the inequities surrounding noise pollution on their communities. It also promotes the co-creation of community noise refuges. Another research tool we are using to understand how noise affects our communities is PhotoVoice. This is an accessible research tool that allows our communities to explore noise visually via photos and videos. And finally, the ICBOs co-created a survey to learn about noise pollution in our communities. We distributed the survey in our communities, collected well over 1,000 responses, and have begun qualitative analysis by engaging in community coding of the responses. We share some quotes from our survey as a sample of the kinds of themes we are uncovering. When asked why marginalized communities experience higher levels of noise, here are some of the replies. One common theme is control over noise and how this impacts our communities, because those communities are put in loud places. Communities of colors may not have the political pull to keep noise-producing infrastructure out of their neighborhood, less political clout to regulate noise. Systemic racism and inequity were also common themes. Poverty and institutional racism, low-income property and industrial zoning are often in close proximity of one another. The comfort of the poor are rarely the concern of the rich. Less quality construction. In our research, we have noted whether respondents attribute high levels of noise to factors that are internal or external to the community, such as national leadership, governmental policies, and history of inequities and social injustices. These communities have historically not had the same opportunities and government resources as high-income communities, and richer communities are able to push noise out of their space. These communities tend to be louder because of where they came from and their surroundings. Intentional and inequitable urban planning and development was often seen as a contributor to higher levels of noise in minoritized communities. Survey respondents say that communities are louder because they have been purposefully placed near highways, airports, and industrial sites. Respondents point to the fact that undesirable aspects of urban living were historically constructed near low-income POC neighborhoods without their input or consent, leaving them more vulnerable to high levels of noise. Historically, there have been development decisions made involving highways, high traffic streets, etc., that positioned these in low SES or socioeconomic status communities without proactive engagement of residents. Because of systemic racial practices, move industry into neighborhoods that don't clutter up the pretty nice white neighborhood. Segregation and oppression are seen as major contributors to higher levels of noise in minority communities throughout survey answers. These themes also bring up the intersection of class and race. Segregation into living areas with lower qualities of life, less care invested into the protection and health of minority communities. Segregation, racism, biases. These are confined to areas such as cities. This is due to redlining, segregation, etc. Communities like this are intentionally put in less desirable living areas. Racism means noisy things are shoved into neighborhoods where people of color live. Many answers point to culture as a main contributor to the high levels of noise in minority communities, and often they group all minoritized communities, Indigenous, Black, Hispanic, and Asian communities together under one culture. Grouping of non-white minorities into one culture reaffirms systemic stereotypes. We call this othering. Many respondents cited higher levels of crime in low-income minority communities as a reason for increased levels of noise pollution in these areas. A few examples are more crime in these areas. These communities often live in urban neighborhoods with higher crime. I think there is more noise because it can get chaotic, and there are higher crime rates in those areas. Police patrol low-income and BIPOC majority neighborhoods more, and so there are more sirens. These communities are often over-policed and over-regulated, and so sounds such as sirens are prevalent. We also noticed many answers that speak about higher rates of policing as a factor. These quotes illustrate just a taste of our preliminary findings. We emphasize our learnings come from both our co-created processes that center equity and our research. The ICBOs are actively presenting and sharing learnings in their communities and at conferences like this one, using the arts, spoken word, music, poetry, theater, and accessible language. The key is community leadership, ownership, and meaningful participation in science. Solutions emerge from the community, and race, equity, and cultural competence are centered to create meaningful change. We invite you to learn more about our project at noiseproject.org.